The Behind the Book lecture series is made possible by World eBook Library, the world's largest database of portable ebooks for academic research, and the World Heritage Encyclopedia, the world's knowledge at your fingertips.
You know, it wasn't as if he was in love with the character of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes was an extremely profitable character for him. Books like The White Company, he wrote because he wanted to write them. Doyle, he was, Scottish, humble birth. He wasn't an aristocrat. Much like the character James Watson, he'd been trained as a doctor, had served in the military and the wars in South Africa. But whatever that kind of talent is in writing, I guess he had it. Because from an early age, and even his early stories, he was popular. And it became so popular, particularly once he started writing the Sherlock Holmes stuff, that he wanted to stop writing it. He wanted to stop Sherlock Holmes. He was kind of done with it. He started to then say, okay, if you want me to write more Sherlock Holmes, I'm going to charge you this much for him. And it was like some exorbitant price that he thought no publisher is going to be able to pay. But they paid it. And so he became really wealthy actually off of his writing, which was unusual at the time. He kind of dabbled in spiritualism and the idea of life beyond death. When he met Houdini, he was convinced that Houdini had mystical powers. And Houdini flat out said, no, these are just illusions. And Houdini performed illusions for him, saying like, look, anybody could do this if they understand how this illusion works. And Doyle flat out refused to believe him and said, no, it's not. That was magic. What I kind of pick up is there's a tension between the stuff that he wanted to write and the stuff that he ended up being asked to write. The White Company, it was something that he wanted to write. He thought it would be a good story. He attended this lecture on medieval history and was bitten by this bug and was like, ooh, I need to write a medieval novel, like historical fiction. And spent like at least a year researching it, just because he wanted to do it. English history, I think, captivated him, and he wanted to share that history with people. But then I think he also wanted to share with people this idea of chivalry that was really gaining a lot of a resurgence and popularity because I think probably the expansion of the British Empire. We aren't just, greedy, money-grubbing imperialists. There's something more important to our character. It's really a parable about innocence coming out into the world. The main character is Elaine. He's been raised in a monastery. He hasn't taken his vows yet, right? So he's not a priest, but he knows how to read, which at that time makes him exceptional. Understands law, he understands history, he understands whatever literature, but he also comes from a noble-born family. And at the age of like 16 or 18, the monk, the abbey pulls him aside and says, it's time for you to go and see the world. And he goes out into the world, and the first people he encounters are basically kind of like thieves and charlatans, and he's like, what is up with the world? Like, I thought there were laws. I thought there was a government. And so he's kind of going through this disillusionment about what the world is. And then he encounters a soldier, one of these archers, a free company of archers, of longbowmen. And he introduces him to this lord. And the lord is this chivalric leader. Small, but he's humble and he's brave and he puts his men before himself. From that point, that launches the series of adventures. And there's battles and duels and taking castles and defending castles, but it's really just him discovering as he goes to the army how awful some people are, while at the same time discovering how good some people are, and really trying to then find his own path of what type of person he's gonna be, as he realizes a lot of the stuff that he's been taught and the way that he's been raised doesn't seem to apply in the real world, but it can. The longbow was such an important part of English society. The longbowman was a symbol that the English commoner could take the field against all these knights on their horses and, you know, these kind of hired mercenaries, and could win battles. Was in some sense became a point of pride. So one of the other characters is this veteran archer, longbowman, and he's kind of, you know, he chases after women, he's a flirt, he kind of swears, you know, he gambles. So he's got all these, in some sense, not so desirable traits, but he ends up being this really loyal and one of the most admirable characters in the entire novel. I think that connected with people. Think about people in 19th century London who are reading White Company, and they're seeing all sorts of people. There's gambling, there's prostitution, you know, there's violence, there's crime, there's all these ugly things surrounding them. So what, are we just kind of failing as a society? And then to read something like this that would say, no, look, a part of our history is this nobility, right? Are these ideals, are this idea that you can be a bit rough around the edges, but you can still be a good person. The kind of English sense of propriety comes from Victorian sensibility. And I think what Doyle is doing in this novel is, in some sense, he's going deeper back. If the English think that propriety is important, why is it important? And it's not just because this marks us as upper class. Underneath this propriety, what is a more important quality? He's zeroing in on maybe this idea of nobility. And there's something about it, there's nobility is beyond just birth. It's something in terms of the character and how we treat other people. The White Company identified some kind of truth or some kind of value that the people wanted to believe about themselves, and something that they wanted to strive towards. And so this idea of chivalry, of honor in ugly situations such as war, that connected with people. The end of the novel is almost like Aesop's fable, moral of the story type thing, where he says, I hope we remember and keep the virtues of this past age or of what we've learned, but we forget the vices. By looking at this time in history, there were some really important key virtues, chivalry, respect for others, honor, that he thought were in danger of being lost, and said, we need to hang on to these. While at the same time recognizing there was a lot of stuff that we're glad is now history. The cruelty and just the mindless corruption within religion or government, these are things that he was hoping we would forget and get past. There was a real message, I think, to the novel, but that doesn't, in some sense, detract it all from it's just cool to read. I think people who enjoy the whole Game of Thrones universe, they would also enjoy the White Company. The people, I think, who enjoy the quest that's in, you know, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, they're gonna tap into the adventure and that same kind of quest and the same kind of, you know, character traits that make characters admirable in the White Company. There's just something, I guess, about that time and the way that, I don't know if it's nostalgic, I don't know if it's just cool, you know, but people like it. You know, you can put yourself into a different universe, but you're still thinking about things that are relevant here and now. That's why books like this endure.